The call to arms. Admiral Nathan Cole stood silently on the bridge of the flagship Retribution, gazing at the holographic projection of Earth. It was almost impossible to imagine that this once vibrant planet, teeming with life, had been reduced to a barren wasteland by the so-called Galactic Council. The majestic blue marble had been obliterated, leaving only the echoes of humanity's past. Now, 3,000 years later, Earth was nothing more than a distant memory, an idea, a myth that others would whisper about, but few would believe. Yet to Cole, it was everything. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Every person aboard his fleet, every fighter pilot, every technician, every officer, carried the scars of that day. They were the descendants of those who had survived in the colonies, hiding on remote planets far away from the Council's reach. They had been left for dead, discarded by the beings who had once ruled the galaxy. But they had survived. They had adapted. And now, they were ready to make their enemies pay. The faint hum of the Retribution's engines filled the silence of the command center, a constant reminder of the power that lay beneath their feet. Cole's eyes narrowed as he watched the projection shift from Earth's verdant landscapes to the scorched wastelands that had become of it. The planet was no longer recognizable, its forests reduced to ash, and its oceans dried up. The Galactic Council had thought they could erase humanity, but they had miscalculated. They had underestimated the resilience of the human spirit. "Admiral," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Harris, his tactical officer, stepping forward with the report. "The fleet is ready for departure. All ships have reported combat readiness," Harris said, her voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of urgency. Cole nodded, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Excellent. It's time to take the fight to them." His crew, descendants of survivors, had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. They were warriors, engineers, and pilots who had trained for decades in secret. This mission wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. They would strike down those who had crushed their ancestors, and they would make the Council regret ever thinking they could destroy them. The shipyards in distant corners of the galaxy had given birth to the most advanced armada humanity could muster. A hammer of retribution, a fleet composed of ships that were a mix of human ingenuity and stolen alien technology, was a testament to human resilience. Each vessel was a work of art, a symbol of survival and defiance. The technology they had reverse-engineered over the centuries had allowed them to create weapons and systems the likes of which the Council had never seen before. This was not the same humanity the Council had destroyed. This was a new breed, fierce, relentless, and ready for battle. "Admiral, all ships are in position. We're ready to move out," Harris reported again, her voice clipped with professionalism. Cole turned to face her, his expression hardening. "Set course for Valkyrie Prime, the first target of our vengeance." The Valkyrie Dominion had long been one of the most influential members of the Galactic Council. Their military might was unmatched, and their arrogance was legendary. They believed their position was unassailable, that nothing could touch them. But Cole knew better. Humanity had learned, adapted, and evolved in the darkest corners of space. The Valkyrie might have controlled the galaxy once, but now, they were about to learn a lesson in humility. The Retribution's engines roared to life as the fleet slipped into hyperspace. Cole's gaze remained fixed on the swirling vortex of stars outside the bridge's observation window, his thoughts steely and determined. The Valkyrie would be their first target, but they were far from the only ones on the list. The Galactic Council's members had forgotten the one thing that made humanity different. They fought for survival. They never gave up. And today, they would make sure the galaxy remembered that lesson. In a hidden shipyard on the fringes of known space, Rear Admiral Jonas Veen stood on the command deck of the last remaining fleet shipyards where the final preparations were underway. This facility, nestled in the dense asteroid belt of the Outer Rim, was humanity's best-kept secret. It had been built in complete isolation, shielded from any prying eyes by the natural obstructions of the belt itself. For years, Veen had overseen the construction of warships that were now poised to reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Every ship built here was a product of generations of human ingenuity. Designs had been modified and improved upon after centuries of salvaging alien technology. And now, these ships were ready to wage war on those who had caused so much suffering. On the deck of one of the massive carriers, Captain Mara Stanton surveyed the fleet. She had been with the fleet since its inception, training the pilots who would now fly the ships that would carry humanity's wrath to the heart of the Council. Her heart swelled with pride as she looked over the rows of starfighters, each one gleaming with freshly applied coatings of advanced armor and weapon systems. Every single one was ready for battle. Mara, Commander Lin, her second-in-command, called as he approached. All squadrons are prepped. We're good to go. Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. We've waited a long time for this. Make sure every pilot knows their target. We're striking hard and fast. There's no room for error. The stakes were higher than ever. If they failed, they wouldn't just lose the battle. They would lose everything. For 3,000 years, humanity had suffered in silence. This was their moment of reckoning. They would not waste it. Back aboard the Retribution, Admiral Cole stared at the holographic map of the Varkari homeworld. Intel gathered by Ethan Drake's infiltration mission on Valeria had given them the upper hand. The virus they had planted into the Varkari communications network was already sowing confusion within their ranks. The Varkari Dominion, while still powerful, was not the unstoppable force it once was. The Council's overconfidence would be their undoing. Admiral, Lieutenant Harris interrupted once again. We're picking up a transmission from Rear Admiral Veen. Put it through, Cole ordered. Veen's holographic image flickered to life, his face stern. Admiral Cole, the final ship is in position. We have 70 capital ships, 150 frigates, and countless fighters at our disposal. Everything is set. Cole's lips twitched into a smile. Good work, Veen. We'll need every ship and every pilot. The Varkari won't know what hit them. Our advantage is the element of surprise. We hit them fast, before they can regroup. Veen nodded. Understood. We'll be right behind you. As the transmission ended, Cole turned to his crew. This is it. The moment we've been preparing for. The Varkari think they're safe. Protected by their fleets, their arrogance. We'll show them the cost of underestimating humanity. With a single command, the fleet jumped into hyperspace, their journey now set in motion. A new dawn of war. The vast emptiness of hyperspace stretched ahead like a black void, a stark contrast to the swarming intensity of the preparations inside the flagship Retribution. Admiral Nathan Cole's crew moved with an eerie sense of purpose, knowing the mission ahead would define not only the fate of the galaxy but the legacy of humanity. Each person on board understood their role in this monumental campaign. They were not just soldiers. They were the last vestige of a forgotten civilization, fighting to reclaim their place in the universe. As the fleet hurtled through hyperspace, Lieutenant Harris remained at her station, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The glow from the controls cast a cold, sterile light on her face as she monitored the fleet's path, ensuring that the navigation systems were operating at full efficiency. Despite the tense atmosphere, she was calm, her professionalism cutting through the rising anxiety that simmered beneath the surface. She had witnessed the damage done to Earth, to humanity, firsthand. And now, for the first time, she truly believed that they could make a difference. Admiral, Harris said, her voice breaking the stillness, we've detected a minor anomaly in the Varkari communications array. It's nothing major, but it's enough to cause some disruption. Cole's piercing blue eyes focused on the readout, his lips curling into a slight smirk. Good. They won't know what hit them. The Varkari Dominion was a formidable enemy, ruthless, technologically advanced, and politically untouchable. But in their arrogance, they had made one fatal mistake. They had assumed humanity's extinction. They had underestimated the power of a species that had fought tooth and nail to survive for millennia. They had forgotten that even in their darkest hour, humanity had always found a way to survive. As the retribution sliced through hyperspace, Cole turned his attention to the tactical map, studying the precise location of Valkyrie Prime. He'd been briefed on every aspect of the planet's defenses, every weak spot that could be exploited. The Valkyrie had never seen an enemy quite like humanity, not in strategy, not in determination, and certainly not in ingenuity. They had no idea that the fleet was about to descend upon them like a storm. Meanwhile, aboard the auxiliary ship Vanguard, Rear Admiral Jonas Veen and his officers were preparing for their own mission. Unlike the flagship, the Vanguard was not a massive behemoth, but rather a nimble assault ship designed for quick, decisive strikes. It was outfitted with a small but deadly complement of stealth fighters, ready to breach the Valkyrie defenses and sow chaos in the heart of their capital. Veen stood at the ship's command console, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was a seasoned warrior, his face weathered by the years of conflict and struggle. There was no fear in him, only an unyielding resolve to succeed. He had seen firsthand the destruction the Valkyrie had wrought on humanity, and he was ready to extract every ounce of vengeance. "Commander Lin," Veen called, "prepare the stealth fighters. We'll need complete silence as we approach. I don't want the Valkyrie to have a moment's notice of our presence." "Understood, sir," Lin replied, her voice steady despite the immense pressure. The stealth fighters aboard the Vanguard were a marvel of human engineering. Built from the same alien technology humanity had reverse-engineered over the years, these ships could slip through the tightest security grids without a whisper. The plan was simple. They would strike the Valkyrie's most vulnerable installations, energy sources, key infrastructure, and then disappear back into the shadows before the enemy had time to retaliate. As the fleet neared its destination, the countdown began. Every ship, every pilot, every officer knew their place in this symphony of destruction. The moment had arrived. There was no turning back. In the darkened war rooms of Valkyrie Prime, the leaders of the Dominion convened in a tense, high-security conference. The leaders, composed of the most powerful figures from various species within the Dominion, sat at a long table made of a strange black metal that seemed to absorb the light. Their faces were stern, and their eyes glinted with a sense of superiority, an arrogance that had defined their rule over the galaxy for centuries. "Reports are coming in from the outer sectors," a Valkyrie officer said, his voice filled with concern. "There have been strange disturbances in our communications. Nothing major yet, but it's enough to cause some concern." A tall, imposing Valkyrie lord at the head of the table, Lord Draxer, leaned forward, his pale eyes narrowing. "A minor glitch. Ridiculous. We are the might of the galaxy. Nothing can threaten us. Not now, not ever." His voice was cold, filled with an arrogance that resonated throughout the room. But there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a tiny hesitation that even he couldn't mask. He had heard rumors of humanity's resurgence, whispers of a fleet assembling on the fringes of known space. But those were just rumors. Nothing solid, nothing concrete. The Valkyrie had eradicated humanity from the galaxy centuries ago. There was no need to concern themselves with ancient ghosts. "I will not allow these distractions to hinder our operations," Lord Draxer continued, his voice gaining strength. "We have a galaxy to control. Let us proceed with our plans for the final phase of the Council's dominance. No one dares defy us." A subordinate cleared their throat. "Sir, there is an incoming transmission. It's from the Valkyrie Military Command on the Outer Rim. They report strange activity, unidentified ships." Lord Draxer's expression shifted. "Unidentified ships? What do you mean? We control every sector of the galaxy. How is this possible?" The officer hesitated. "It appears to be a small fleet, an extremely advanced fleet, too advanced for anything we have in our records." The room fell silent. The implications of such a statement hung in the air like a heavy fog. The thought of an unknown fleet operating in their space was anathema to the Valkyrie. They had controlled the galaxy for millennia, and the very idea that something, or someone, could challenge their power was unthinkable. "Find them," Lord Draxir hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "We will crush whatever insignificant force dares to challenge us." Back aboard the Retribution, Admiral Cole received the confirmation that they had entered Valkyrie space. The fleet was now in enemy territory. The stakes were higher than ever. "Deploy all fighters," Cole ordered, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Let's show them exactly who we are." The starfighter squadrons of humanity's armada shot out from their ships like a swarm of vengeful hornets. Each pilot felt the surge of adrenaline as they entered the atmosphere of Valkyrie Prime, their craft hidden beneath the cover of stealth technology. The Valkyrie had no idea what was coming. "All units, prepare for engagement," Captain Mara Stanton called over the comms to her squadron. "This is the moment we've been waiting for. Take out their defenses, hit hard, and don't let up. We end this today." As the Valkyrie forces scrambled to respond, the fleet's first wave struck with the precision of a hammer. Blinding flashes of light filled the sky as human ships tore through the Valkyrie defenses. With each strike, humanity's anger and resolve were channeled into their weapons, and the shockwaves rippled out through the galaxy, announcing to the Council that humanity had returned, not as subjugated remnants, but as conquerors in their own right. The unseen reckoning. The first salvo of humanity's counteroffensive had struck with brutal precision. The Retribution and its fleet of supporting ships continued to unleash wave after wave of laser fire and missile strikes, breaching the Valkyrie defenses with overwhelming force. Yet, despite the devastating onslaught, the true strength of the battle still lay hidden in the shadows, within the depths of the Valkyrie capital and the intelligence that they had long overlooked. As the human fleet unleashed its fury on Valkyrie Prime, Admiral Cole sat in his command chair aboard the Retribution, his icy blue eyes scanning the tactical map. The Valkyrie's power grid flickered on the screen, an unstable pulse as their energy systems began to buckle under the weight of the human assault. "Their shields are holding steady in the core sectors," Harris reported, her voice steady as she analyzed the data. "They're funneling all their reserves into the capital's central fortress. Then we hit them where they least expect it," Cole said, his lips curling into a grim smile. "Their core will break when we hit their supply lines. Get the Vanguard into position for the second wave. The stealth fighters need to cut off their resupply routes." "Understood, sir. Deploying stealth bombers now." Elsewhere, aboard the Vanguard, Rear Admiral Jonas Vine's command was already in motion. The Vanguard had positioned itself deep within the shadows of a nearby asteroid field, cloaked by the lingering nebula gases that made it almost invisible to Valkyrie sensors. The small, agile stealth fighters, equipped with cloaking technology reverse-engineered from alien tech, were the spearhead of this covert attack. "Commander Lin," Vine said as he stood over the tactical display, "are we ready for Phase 2? Lin, her fingers dancing over the controls with practiced ease, nodded. "All fighters are in position, Admiral. We're within range of their primary supply depot. The moment we strike, the Valkyrie will feel the pressure in every sector. They won't be able to resupply their front lines." Vine's eyes hardened as he stared out into the cold expanse of space. He had seen his share of battles, but nothing had prepared him for the moment he was about to face. The fate of humanity rested on their ability to cripple the Valkyrie's infrastructure. If they failed, the entire fleet would be exposed to a counterattack that could devastate everything they had fought for. "Deploy the fighters," Vine ordered. "This is our moment. We make them bleed." The stealth fighters surged forward like shadows, their engines whisper quiet as they weaved through the asteroid field. Vine watched with grim determination as the fighter squadrons emerged from their cloaks, approaching the heart of the Valkyrie supply depot. The massive fuel tankers and munitions stockpiles were vulnerable. Humanity's secret weapon was the ability to strike fast, strike hard, and disappear before the enemy could react. "Target acquired," Commander Lin said, her voice cool and calm. Firing. In an instant, the sky was lit with explosions. Bright flashes filled the void as precision-guided missiles tore into the Valkyrie supply lines. The supply depot erupted in a fireball, sending shockwaves that reverberated throughout the planet's atmosphere. The Vanguard's fighter squadron streaked back into the shadows, vanishing into the blackness before the Valkyrie could mount any form of retaliation. Back on Valkyrie Prime, Lord Draxer had just received the grim news from his military command. His empire, his carefully constructed illusion of invincibility, was starting to unravel. The Valkyrie Dominion, built on centuries of dominance, was being threatened by a force that could not be predicted, that did not obey the rules of conventional warfare. "What is this madness?" Draxer growled, slamming his fist onto the table in frustration. "How could this happen? Who dares to defy us?" An officer, trembling from the realization of the scale of their impending defeat, stepped forward. "Lord Draxer, the enemy. They're everywhere. We've lost control of key supply routes. Our military assets are being dismantled. Our outer defenses are collapsing." The leader of the Valkyrie Dominion stood, his thin frame suddenly seeming smaller, more vulnerable. His eyes, usually filled with cold calculation, now burned with the fury of someone who had lost all sense of control. "This cannot be. They are mere remnants, a forgotten species," Draxer muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "They will bow before the Dominion, or they will be crushed." But even as Draxer raged, something had shifted in the atmosphere of Valkyrie Prime. A low, rhythmic tremor shook the ground, like the pulse of a distant heartbeat. The Valkyrie had forgotten what it felt like to be on the receiving end of a war, had long erased from their minds the primal fear that any invader could instill. And now, they were experiencing it once again, as the forces of humanity moved closer and closer to their final stronghold. Meanwhile, in the heart of the retribution, the War Council had begun its next phase of strategic planning. Admiral Cole surveyed his officers, his fingers steepled in front of him, his mind already calculating their next move. The initial strike had been successful, but they had no illusions. This was far from over. "We've broken their supply lines," Cole began, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. "But we still have one more obstacle to overcome: their main planetary defense systems. We need to take out their command center." "We've identified the primary location of their central command," Harris interjected. "It's buried deep beneath the planet's surface, well protected, but not invulnerable." "Good," Cole replied. "Prepare for orbital bombardment. We'll break through their defenses from the sky, but we need boots on the ground to finish the job. Prepare the invasion force." On the surface of Valkyrie Prime, the citizens of the Dominion were beginning to feel the effects of the invasion. The once pristine streets, gleaming with the false promise of prosperity, were now shaken by the reverberations of explosions above and below. News of the assault spread like wildfire, and panic began to grip the ruling classes of the Valkyrie Empire. The vast military machine they had spent centuries constructing was slowly grinding to a halt, and those who had once held absolute power now found themselves scrambling to preserve whatever they could of their once great civilization. For the people of Valkyrie Prime, it was a new kind of fear, one they had never felt before. The realization that their world was slipping from their grasp was as incomprehensible as it was terrifying. Back in orbit, the retribution prepared for its final decisive blow. The fleet was lined up, ready to rain destruction down on the capital of the Valkyrie Dominion. But for Admiral Cole, the victory would not be measured in the number of explosions or the size of the wreckage left behind. No, this war was about something far greater. It was about reclaiming the dignity of humanity, about returning to the galaxy as an equal, not as a forgotten species. "Let's end this," Cole said, his voice hard as steel. "For Earth, for humanity." The countdown began. The fleet's ships powered up their weapons systems, and the first volley of orbital bombardment was unleashed. Bright flashes of light filled the sky above Valkyrie Prime as the storm of destruction rained down upon the heart of the Dominion. With each explosion, the walls of the once invincible empire crumbled, piece by piece, and as the final, thunderous blast shattered the Valkyrie Central Command, the message became clear: humanity had returned, and nothing, not even the might of the Valkyrie Dominion, could stand in its way. The echo of defeat. The battle for Valkyrie Prime was not just a war of spacefaring fleets and high-tech weaponry. It had become a war for the future of the galaxy itself, where the fate of humanity hung in the balance. As the dust began to settle and the shockwaves of the orbital bombardment reverberated through the planet's core, a new challenge emerged from the depths of space, a challenge that would test the very limits of the human spirit. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as the final remnants of the Valkyrie defense systems fell apart. The Valkyrie capital was a charred wasteland now, its once pristine towers reduced to rubble, its skies darkened by the firestorms of the bombardment. There was no longer any question of victory. Humanity had broken the Dominion, leaving only the question of what came next. "The capital is in ruins, Admiral," Harris reported, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of their success. "Their fleet is in disarray. We've wiped out their military leadership." Cole nodded but said nothing. His eyes were locked on the shattered world below, his mind far away. The destruction was immense, but it was only a part of the larger picture. The Valkyrie might have lost their power, but their empire's collapse would create a vacuum in the galaxy, one that could lead to even greater chaos. Humanity had not just won a battle, they had set the stage for a new era of intergalactic politics and power struggles, one in which their presence could not be ignored. "I want a full assessment of their remaining defenses," Cole ordered, his voice cutting through the silence on the bridge. "We're not finished yet. We need to be prepared for their last-ditch retaliation." On the surface of Valkyrie Prime, the streets once filled with fear and oppression had become desolate. Where towering monuments to the Dominion's power had stood, only craters remained. The survivors of the Valkyrie leadership, those who had managed to escape the collapse of the Central Command, were now scattered and disorganized. Some fled into the subterranean cities, hoping to regroup and plot a counteroffensive, while others, those who had seen the futility of further resistance, chose to surrender. Lord Draxer had once been the undisputed ruler of the Valkyrie Dominion, a figurehead feared by all. Now he was a broken man. He sat in the ruins of what had once been his palace, his hands trembling as he stared at the screen in front of him. His advisors, no longer the elite officials they once were, looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and contempt. He had been their leader, their commander, and now he was their last hope. But hope was a currency that no longer held value in this new brutal reality. "They've destroyed everything," one of his generals muttered, slumping in his chair. "Our fleet, our infrastructure, our very foundation. It's all gone." Draxer's eyes flickered with a spark of anger, though it was faint and weak. "This can't be the end," he whispered. "We have resources still. The hidden weapons caches. Use them. The sleeper ships in the outer rim. We still have some power left. We can rebuild. We have to." "Lord Draxer," another officer spoke up hesitantly, "there is no more time. Their fleets are everywhere. The retribution, it's too powerful. Even if we activate the hidden reserves, it won't be enough." Draxer's lips twisted into a grimace, his mind racing as he searched for a way out of the abyss. "Then we make them pay. If we cannot win, we will make them bleed. If we fall, we'll drag them down with us." His plan, however, was one born of desperation, a final attempt to reclaim some semblance of control in a galaxy that no longer cared for the Valkyrie Dominion. Back aboard the Retribution, the crew had already begun preparations for the aftermath of the battle. The corridors were quieter now, with the frenzy of battle subsiding into the cold aftermath of a war won. Yet the feeling of victory did little to ease the burden on Admiral Cole's shoulders. He knew that even in victory, humanity would face a series of daunting questions. "Admiral," Harris said, stepping into his private briefing room. "We've received reports from the outer regions. Several Valkyrie sleeper ships have activated and are moving toward uncharted space. It looks like they're fleeing the system." Cole turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Where are they headed?" "We're still trying to pinpoint their exact location, but it seems like they're heading for the Zothar Nebula. It's remote, difficult to track, and far from the core systems. If they manage to reach that region, we might lose them for good." Cole considered this for a moment. He knew what that could mean. The Valkyrie, despite their defeat, were not a species to simply roll over and die. They would regroup, they would rebuild, and they would come for humanity again. This time in secret, in the shadows. If they managed to escape into the nebula, they would have the time and resources to launch a counterattack, one that could take humanity by surprise. "We can't let them escape," Cole said, his voice steely with resolve. "Set a course for the Zothar Nebula. We're going after them." Meanwhile, in the dark reaches of the galaxy, the last remnants of the Valkyrie military were assembling their forces in secret. Their sleeper ships, hidden away in the outermost reaches of known space, were now their only hope. Draxur's plan was beginning to take shape, though he knew that time was running out. His final weapon was something far more dangerous than any fleet or army. It was a device hidden deep within the Valkyrie's vast research stations, something that could tilt the balance of power once again. The Valkyrie had been working on the technology for years, an experimental weapon designed to harness the power of a black hole, capable of creating a singularity that could annihilate entire star systems in a flash. The project had been shelved long ago, deemed far too unstable for use, but in the face of certain defeat, Draxur had ordered it activated. "We'll create a black hole," Draxur muttered to himself as he paced through the dimly lit war room of his hidden stronghold. "A weapon that will tear apart the very fabric of space. It'll give us the power to strike back, to bring the humans to their knees. The retribution won't survive it. No one will." As he activated the weapon, the last hope of the Valkyrie Dominion, he could only pray that the unstable device would do what he needed it to. And if it didn't, if the weapon failed as it was likely to, he knew he would have no choice but to destroy everything before humanity could get to them. The retribution followed the trail of the fleeing Valkyrie ships into the Zothar Nebula, where the vast clouds of dust and gas hid them from any scanners. It was a place of deep silence and impenetrable darkness, where even the bravest of ships could easily disappear without a trace. But as they entered the nebula's heart, Cole's instincts kicked in. Something was off. The energy readings coming from the nebula were strange, erratic, almost unnatural. The retribution sensors began to glitch, and the entire ship shuddered as though it had entered a gravitational field that was not supposed to exist. "Admiral," Harris said urgently, "I think they've activated the weapon. The energy readings are off the charts." Cole's eyes widened. The device was operational. The Valkyrie had created something that could shift the very fabric of space itself, and it was drawing them closer to the point of no return. "This is it," Cole whispered. "All hands, brace for impact. We got one chance to stop them before it's too late." As the retribution hurtled toward the source of the anomaly, the crew braced for what could very well be their final confrontation with the Valkyrie, and the weapon that might decide the fate of the galaxy itself. The singularity of fate. The retribution trembled in the vastness of the Zothar Nebula, its hull shuddering with the increasing gravitational pull of the weapon. In the distance, faint flashes of energy illuminated the nebula's dense clouds, offering eerie glimpses of what lay ahead, a swirling, distorted mass at the heart of the anomaly. The gravitational field was unlike anything the ship's sensors had ever detected. A singularity, a collapsing black hole whose very presence threatened to warp reality itself. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, something that could rip through star systems in an instant. "Admiral, we're being pulled toward it," Harris shouted, her voice laced with panic. "The gravity's too strong. We can't break free." Cole's heart raced, his mind rapidly calculating their options. The Valkyrie had been working on the device for years, perfecting it in secret. Now, it was within their grasp, and if they didn't act fast, it could be the end of everything they had fought for. Deploy all stabilizers and shields. Cole barked, his voice sharp and commanding. We need to counteract the gravity, or we'll be sucked in. Get us to the source of the weapon, now. The crew scrambled into action. Alarms blared as the ship's engines pushed to their maximum capacity, but the pull of the singularity seemed insurmountable. The retribution shields flared brightly, absorbing the stress of the immense gravitational forces, but even they were beginning to flicker under the strain. Harris, her brow furrowed in concentration, glanced at the ship's console. Admiral, the Valkyrie ships are in range. They're preparing to launch. I think they intend to trigger the weapon before we can stop them. Cole clenched his jaw, his eyes scanning the vastness of the nebula. He could see the ghostly outlines of the Valkyrie fleet, their ships moving erratically but purposefully toward a central point, the core of the black hole's event horizon. And there, at the center of it all, stood the facility where the singularity generator was housed, a complex structure nestled in a hidden asteroid field, surrounded by a web of defensive satellites and warships. We don't have much time, Cole muttered. If we don't neutralize the generator, they'll collapse the entire system. Meanwhile, within the Valkyrie command center, Draxer stood before a massive holographic display, his eyes cold and determined. He watched the unfolding battle on the edge of the nebula, his heart filled with a mixture of dread and exhilaration. The weapon, the pinnacle of their empire's technological achievements, was finally activated. It was their final gambit, a last-ditch effort to reclaim some semblance of dominance over humanity. You have done well, Lord Draxer, one of his surviving commanders said, his voice shaky yet filled with reverence. The singularity is functioning perfectly. The human fleet won't stand a chance against it. Draxer's gaze never wavered from the holographic map, though a small flicker of doubt crossed his mind. The weapon had to work. There was no other option. Failure was not an outcome he could allow. He had already seen his empire crumble. This was their last chance to secure their place in the galaxy. Initiate Phase 2, Draxer ordered, his voice low but firm. Target the retribution first. We'll destabilize their fleet, then we activate the full power of the singularity. Back on the retribution, Cole's pulse quickened as he realized the scale of what was unfolding before him. The Valkyrie were preparing to fire their weapon, and it wasn't just a matter of preventing the collapse of Valkyrie Prime anymore. This singularity had the potential to destabilize the entire region of space, affecting everything in its path. Humanity's colonies, the Valkyrie homeworld, even the galactic core itself. It could tear apart the very fabric of space-time. Brace for impact. Cole shouted as the first wave of Valkyrie ships launched their attack. The retribution shields flared violently, absorbing the blasts as they pounded against the hull. The ship veered left and right, narrowly avoiding several near-miss missiles. But Cole knew this wasn't a fight they could win with force alone. They had to reach the singularity generator. We need to disable their defenses. Harris, take us to that asteroid field. Cole ordered. Full power to the engines. We'll have to go in close. And we'll have to be quick. Harris gripped the helm, her knuckles white, as she guided the ship through the asteroid field. The nebula's chaos made the environment treacherous, but she had trained for this moment. Every maneuver was calculated, every burst of energy strategically timed. The retribution slipped between the floating rocks, narrowly avoiding collisions while dodging the relentless fire from the Valkyrie fleet. Admiral, we're within range of the generator, Harris said. But the Valkyrie are closing in. We need to move fast. The asteroid field ahead of them seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as though the very rocks themselves were alive with the gravitational forces at play. The retribution was now deep inside the zone, where no ship could safely navigate without the proper countermeasures. The Valkyrie fleet, though battered, was relentless. Every ship was closing in, desperate to defend their weapon at all costs. Cole's heart hammered in his chest as he felt the weight of the mission press down on him. The Singularity generator was just ahead, surrounded by a cloud of debris and fractured warships. It was protected by multiple layers of defense, all designed to buy the Valkyrie time to complete their weapons launch. "Get us closer," Cole said through gritted teeth. "We have to disable that generator before it reaches full capacity." Harris nodded, her focus razor-sharp as she piloted the Retribution through the asteroid field. The ship bucked and groaned under the strain, but Harris never hesitated. She was a master of her craft, and the Admiral knew that this was their only shot. The ship moved ever closer to the generator's location, the surrounding debris now a deadly web of floating wreckage. The Valkyrie were not about to let them slip past. A massive warship appeared ahead, firing its weapons directly at them. "Incoming," Harris yelled, throwing the ship into evasive maneuvers. The Retribution swerved to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast, but the shockwave rattled the ship. "I can't keep this up much longer." "We don't have a choice," Cole barked. "Get us to the generator. Now." With a final burst of speed, the Retribution broke through the last line of defense, closing in on the Singularity generator. It was massive, a towering structure embedded in the heart of a moon-sized asteroid, pulsating with dark energy. It was emitting a low hum, a sound that resonated in the core of Cole's being, like a forewarning of the doom it could unleash. "Prepare to deploy the EMP," Cole ordered. "If we don't knock out their power systems, this whole mission will fail." Harris nodded, her fingers dancing across the console as she engaged the EMP systems. The ship's systems powered down momentarily, sending a jolt of tension through the air. The Retribution drifted dangerously close to the generator as the countdown began. Seconds felt like hours. The EMP pulse shot forward, slamming into the generator's power grid. The massive structure shuddered, sending waves of energy through the surrounding area. Sparks flew from the generator's exposed conduits, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to go still. But then, the system roared back to life with renewed intensity, as if it had merely been momentarily stunned. Cole's eyes widened as the generator began to flicker, then surge again. The EMP had only delayed the inevitable. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice low and resolute. "We still have one final chance." The battle for the fate of the galaxy had reached its zenith. The Singularity generator, now fully activated, began to collapse space-time around it, and the Retribution's fate was sealed unless Cole could somehow pull off a miracle. The final choice. The darkness of the nebula seemed to swallow the Retribution as it hovered precariously near the Singularity generator, its hull groaning under the immense forces threatening to tear it apart. The Valkyrie fleet, though battered, remained relentless. They could sense victory within their grasp. The weapon was on the verge of full activation, and humanity's last hope was fading with each passing second. Cole stood in the command center, his mind racing. Every decision, every command, had brought him to this precipice. The EMP had not worked as they had hoped, and now the generator was fully charged, its power resonating through the ship, a constant reminder of the gravity of their situation. The Singularity was collapsing faster than anticipated, its event horizon expanding, drawing everything into its maw. "Admiral," Harris's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp with urgency. "The Singularity is expanding at an accelerated rate. If we don't stop it now, we're all going to be sucked in. We need to make a choice." The weight of her words hit Cole like a hammer. His mind flashed through every possible option, every angle they could exploit to save the Retribution and prevent the catastrophe. But each one felt like a dead end. The Singularity was too powerful, the Valkyrie too determined, and time was slipping away. But then a thought struck him, a final, desperate plan, one that had seemed impossible until now. It was a long shot, an untested theory. Yet in this moment, when all seemed lost, it was the only hope they had left. "Send a direct communication to the Valkyrie flagship," Cole ordered, his voice steady. Tell them we're willing to negotiate a ceasefire. We'll destroy the generator together. No more bloodshed. Harris blinked in confusion. Admiral, they won't listen. The Valkyrie are committed to activating the weapon. We've already seen how far they're willing to go. Cole's gaze hardened, his eyes narrowing. I know, but I need to buy us some time. They won't destroy the generator if they think we can be bargained with. We need to distract them long enough to disable it. The tension in the room thickened. Everyone knew the risks. Valkyrie pride, their fanatic devotion to victory, and their refusal to negotiate. Yet in this moment, Cole was counting on their arrogance. He had to believe they wouldn't risk losing everything if they thought humanity might have an ace up its sleeve. A few minutes later, the Retribution's communication channel crackled to life, the voice of Draxer booming through the speakers. You are wasting your time, Cole. You cannot escape. The singularity is in motion. Your fate is sealed. Draxer's voice was filled with cold confidence. I will watch as you and your fleet are consumed by the void. Cole's fingers tightened around the armrest of his chair. You can still stop this, Draxer. We can work together. We both know what this weapon can do. If you fire it, it will destroy everything. Valkyrie, humans, even your precious empire. Don't let pride blind you to the consequences. There was a long pause on the line, silence hanging like a thick fog. Then, Draxer's voice returned, this time tinged with something different. Uncertainty. You believe I can be swayed. You overestimate your position, human. Cole leaned forward, his voice sharp. No, I believe you're scared. You're as afraid of the singularity as I am. It will destroy everything, Draxer. Your empire, your fleet, your legacy. Do you think you can control it? Draxer hesitated, his tone now less assured. You think I fear failure? The Valkyrie have always been driven by power. Cole interrupted, his voice low and intense. But power isn't control. Power without limits consumes everything in its path. You've seen what happens when a black hole becomes unstable. If you unleash this weapon, you'll collapse not just the galaxy, but the very fabric of space. The Valkyrie Empire won't survive, no matter how powerful you believe yourselves to be. There was a shift in Draxer's tone, a crack in his unflinching facade. You think you can outwit me, human? I will not fall for your lies. I'm not lying, Cole said, his voice steady, but I'll offer you one more chance. You shut down the weapon. We'll join forces, figure out a way to survive this anomaly together, and I'll guarantee safe passage for your people. The destruction of your empire isn't inevitable, unless you choose it. For a long moment, the communication remained silent. Then, in a voice quieter than before, Draxer spoke again. Perhaps you are right, Admiral Cole. Perhaps it is time to reconsider my approach. The transmission cut out abruptly. Cole's heart skipped a beat. He knew better than to believe it was over, but Draxer's doubt was the opening they needed. The Retribution was still dangerously close to the singularity generator, and the Valkyrie fleet was moments away from closing in for the kill. Time was running out, and the singularity was expanding faster than ever before. There was no guarantee that Draxer would back down. Prepare the secondary EMP, Cole ordered, his voice urgent. This is our last chance. Harris, understanding the gravity of his words, immediately set to work. She was calculating the trajectory, adjusting the Retribution's course toward the singularity's core. The shields were down to minimal power, flickering and failing under the strain, but Harris remained calm. If this was their final shot, she would give it everything she had. The battle raged on as the Retribution made its final approach to the generator. The Valkyrie fleet, having received word of Cole's attempts at negotiation, unleashed everything they had in a final desperate attempt to finish the fight. But Cole and Harris were already beyond reach of their weapons. They had calculated the timing perfectly, and with one final explosive burst of energy, the secondary EMP was deployed directly into the heart of the singularity generator. For a moment, everything stood still. Then, like the collapse of a star, the generator erupted in a wave of energy so powerful that it lit up the entire nebula. The black hole, the weapon, and the Valkyrie fleet were caught in the storm, collapsing in on themselves as the singularity tore apart the surrounding space. The retribution shuddered violently as it was caught in the shockwave. The hull groaned, the lights flickered, and the ship lurched dangerously as it was pushed away from the event horizon. "We're losing power," Harris screamed as the ship's systems failed. The singularity was still trying to pull them in, but the gravitational forces had been disrupted. The weapon was gone, but so was the threat of total annihilation. The retribution plummeted through the collapsing nebula, careening toward what seemed like an endless abyss. And yet, in the midst of the chaos, Cole found a strange sense of peace. They had done it. Against all odds, they had stopped the weapon, and they had saved humanity from the brink of destruction. Weeks later, after the chaos had subsided and the remnants of the Valkyrie fleet had retreated, Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Retribution, staring out at the quiet expanse of space. His crew had survived the ordeal, and the galaxy was still intact, but the consequences of their actions would echo for generations to come. The battle for survival had been won, but now the true question remained. Had they truly averted disaster, or had they merely delayed the inevitable? And was it their will to survive that had saved them, or something more?